What is up, you guys? So in today's video I wanted to talk about my start, medium, and finish in DC politics. So my start, continuation, and ending in the world of DC politics, and so how I got involved, how it went, and how I got out of it. And so to start, I just want to give a shout out to Ben Shapiro, my former boss. He's the guy that got me involved in the beginning, and I want to say that I appreciate him a lot. He was actually the reason why I was so attracted to that world, because he was such a good boss. He was I started working for him. It was completely like accidental. While I was in college, I was working in LA. I was in school, I was an undergrad studying human biology, and I wanted to go be a doctor, but I didn't really know what I wanted. I wanted to be a doctor because it was, in my mind, it was like the only thing I could think of that would make me a lot of money, and then I can start my own business. And but you know, over the years I learned there's so many ways to make money. You don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to go to school for 12, 13, 14 years after high school. But at the time it was like the only idea I had. I wanted to become big, make a lot of money, and start my own clinic, my own business. I didn't even want to be working, really. I just wanted to be an entrepreneur, which I realized later on in life. But at the time, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a doctor. And I remember meeting Ben Shapiro at a family event when I was with, it was a Shabbat thing. I was with my family at it. I didn't even want to be there. And I met Ben Shapiro, and I was like, oh my God, I heard you on the radio. And he was like the only person I listened to on the radio. And I really appreciated his perspective on things. He was a capitalist. He was pro free markets. He was pro a lot of things he was pro reality, like a lot of things that I really like. The reasons that I decided to be a conservative when I joined politics. Ben Shapiro was a big influence. So I started working for him. I interned for him for about a year while I was in college, and then he offered me a job. I was working for his company that from the beginning of when they started Daily Wire. I was there even before that. So I got to be on the ground floor of Daily Wire while they were still a startup and they were getting investment money. And it was a really cool experience. I got to get paid to do something that a lot of people are doing for free, especially as college students. So that was my last year of college when I was actually getting paid, working Daily Wire. And then eventually I was like, you know what, I love this so much that I want to go, I want to drop med school. This is way more fun than what I'm doing in school. I'm getting in so much debt. I'm paying so much money to take my MCAT, to study for the MCAT, to take all these extra classes for med school. And applying for med school is really expensive. Just the application process, if you wanted to put everything into it and really go all out, I calculated, including like flying for the interviews and secondary applications and all that stuff, about $10,000 if you want to go, standard. If you want to apply to like 30, 40 schools, which is what most people do at the very least, you have to apply to like 30, 40 schools. If you want to do your primary applications, each primary application cost it at that time about $120. I'm sure now it's a lot more expensive. If you want to take your MCAT, if you want to study for your MCAT, take an MCAT course, whichever, you have to take an MCAT course if you're going to take the MCAT. Like, I don't know anybody who's taken the MCAT without taking an MCAT course. You can't train all this stuff on your own. So there were a few reasons why I was like, you know what, screw this. I'm making money working for Ben Shapiro, doing something that I love, having so much fun writing, and I don't want to wait until I'm 100 years old until I finally start making money as a doctor, especially because I also wanted to leave the Orthodox community and the Orthodox Jewish community that I was in at the time, and I didn't really know how I could do that while still depending on other people financially, you know what I mean? So I really wanted a way to short-term make money while I build for my future. So the writing thing was a perfect way to do that. I got involved in politics that way also because it was exciting and fun, and it was a way for me to do a job that didn't require me to be at a hospital to do hands-on work. It was like writing, So Ben allowed me to keep working for him while I decided to move to DC, even though he did, to his credit, try to encourage me to not get involved in politics and to actually go to college and do like a real doctor sort of thing. He wanted me to actually continue on to becoming a doctor. But deep down, I knew that I could make way more money in a different way. I just didn't know how at the time. So I didn't know how to explain it yet, but I knew that as an entrepreneur, I didn't have to go to school. I knew deep down because I had grown up, I was raised around a lot of Jewish immigrants who made like crazy sick amounts of money and had never gone to college before. They did it by strategizing because they were entrepreneurs. So I wanted to be like that, but I just didn't know exactly what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it yet. So anyway, hope I'm not being too confusing. So I was making, I think working at Daily Wire, I was making like $45,000 a year. Yeah, $45,000. That was my salary, but I was getting paid by the hour, so I wasn't actually making the exact $45,000. I was making based on my hours, which was very part-time. So especially towards the end, and I was working there for a few years. So I moved to DC, got a job in this company, and oh gosh, like once I moved to DC, I realized that I was working for a company that was a newswire, and I was getting paid like a set salary every month. I realized very quickly that not every job in politics was going to be as exciting as Daily Wire, and in fact, no boss was going to be as nice or as exciting as working for Ben Shapiro. I did actually have a boss that I really liked towards the end. He was like perfect. He was an awesome boss, and that was at Pinkston Group. I did work at Pinkston Group for a few months. It was over a summer, and I really liked them. And now whenever I meet people that are looking for PR, I always try to direct them to Pinkston Group because they're actually a really good PR company. But anyway, I digress like a million times. So I started off at Daily Wire. In the process, dropped med school applications. I actually did the primary applications, and I was starting to do the secondary applications, which involved so much, it involved so much work, so much writing essays, so much effort, to extra tests, like just so crazy, the process. And so I dropped med school applications during that time and decided to just go straight to DC. I got a job. First, I actually went to New York City because I wanted to work in New York City as a writer. I was trying to work for like Fox News. I applied to like every single Fox News position that was available. I also applied to CNN, and I applied everywhere, all the media outlets. I knew I had a higher chance at Fox News because Ben Shapiro had connections there. So I didn't get anything in New York City. After spending a few months in New York City, I was kind of like exhausted. And finally someone was like, hey, there's a place that's looking for writers in DC. And I was like, well, I've never been to DC before. Do you think it pays well? And they were like, well, actually you get paid $50,000 a year, $50K. And that was more than I was making at Daily Wire. So I was like, oh, cool. I'm going to go and work at that place. And I was also doing articles for Leadership Institute, which I was making about $100 per article, $50 if it was their idea, $100 if it was my idea. So there were like a few different writing gigs that I was getting involved in, like through different things and through meeting people. And actually the DC job I met through the Leadership Institute people. One of my friends there, she like introduced me. And anyway, so many jobs. I ended up taking so many jobs. That company kind of folded while I was there. They weren't able to pay us, and I pretty much took the money I had already made and ran. I was like, guys, I'm not gonna work for free for you guys. Unlike a lot of people that decided to actually stay there and keep working for free, for me, I had a line like, if I can't survive working for you, then I can't work for you. So I left. I found another job working at Red Alert. It was a Washington Examiner's college brand. So I was working there. I was making $42,500 a year, working at Red Alert as their contributors examiner. That job lasted for maybe like 6 months. It was I really hated it. It was miserable. You know, I had a boss. He was never there, but he was also very micromanaging. So like I had hundreds of contributors working under me, and I actually knew some of them. And so so it was actually like a really fun, the job itself was really fun because I got to like write stories, and I got to do, you know, write stories, come up with ideas for the Washington Examiner's college brand. And I got to meet people, some of you that actually watch this channel, Rosemary, I'm looking at you, and a bunch of other people that I knew, and was like, hey, I'm an editor now, you guys want to like write? And that was in 2017. Yeah, it was 2017. I was like, hey, you guys, like, you know, want to write? So anyway, it was a fun job, the job itself, but because of the office structure and the relationship I had with my boss, it was not a fun job. So like my boss, he was never there, and he was also very micromanaging, so like I wasn't able to do anything without everything going through him. But also like he would take a while to like respond to, like, anytime anyone messaged me, like any contributor emailed me, it had to like, he had to be CC'd on it, and I had to like first send it to him, find out what he wanted me to respond, because he was just very, very micromanaging. He wouldn't let me like do anything on my own, but he also was too slow in like communicating with me about what he wanted me to do. So everything was just really slow and lagging. And it got to a point where like everything was blamed on the fact that everything was so slow was blamed on me, even though like I actually was always like really, really quick. I was completely just dependent on my supervisor, who was never there and didn't even want to be there, and he was like acting like this college brand was like a waste of his time. And it's like, you know, so it got to a point where the company actually wanted to like get rid of our brand because we were just moving so slow. So anyway, before I could take the blame for, you know, that place being so slow, and I remember a lot of you guys, actually some of you that are watching this might remember having tried to contribute to Red Alert at the time when I was the editor there in 2017, and seeing your papers rejected. Believe me, I was not rejecting your papers. I was very happy to, like, if there was a problem with anyone's papers, I had nothing else to do. I was very happy to like make it better and publish it, you know, publish your papers and just fix it up the way that they wanted to. But they were so micromanaging. My supervisor was so micromanaging that like everything had to first go through him, and he had to decide if it was good or not. And because he was didn't want to be bothered with that brand, he was constantly just like rejecting everything. But then he would make me be the bad guy to tell you guys that it's rejected. And he also didn't want me to tell you that like he was the one that wanted to reject them. So like he wanted me to, like, on behalf of myself, be like, yeah, we don't want your articles. And so that's what happened to a lot of people. I just had to sit there and reject people's articles. So not only did I have contributors getting upset at me because I was rejecting their articles, but then I also had to take the fall from corporate that was like, guys, why is your paper moving so slow? And so before that could happen, I just quit that job, which I should have done. I should have quit so much earlier, but I didn't. But I realized eventually, very slowly, that I was about to take the hit. As a random newbie editor, I was about to take the blame for my boss's inadequacy. Yeah, I ended up quitting, and I know that they probably thought it was my fault, but eventually I saw that they folded the brand anyway. So eventually, like, you know, obviously it was not my fault that paper shut down, you know, because I left, and then they hired somebody else, and even after they hired that new person, that paper still shut down. So obviously it was not my fault. I didn't create the paper, so, you know. But after I left from there, I reached out to Benny Johnson, who was at the time working at the Independent Journal Review, and I was like, hey, I need a job. I'm an editor at the Washington Examiner, a college brand, and he was like, cool, work here, IJR. I went to work at IJR, very enthusiastic. I had this whole record of like viral news content, under my belt that I was just out of college, maybe a year or two, but one thing I was really good at, actually just a year out of college, but one thing I was really good at by that time was creating viral news articles, aggregating good, choppy, quick viral news stories, catchy stories, and so knowing what kind of stories would be good, how to frame them, wrap them up into like a story that's gonna run with the news cycle, and also how to write a headline that was really good and clickbaity. And one thing that IJR and Benny Johnson were known for at the time was clickbait. So they brought me on, and I started doing a really, really good job. I was working, starting the first day that I started, I was already like at the top of their list. It was a little competitive. They had like, everybody's names next to like how many views, in real time, how many views their articles were getting every day. And quickly, the first week, my name went up to the top because I was just getting those viral news articles, and I was being really autistic about it. I was studying it. I was like really being passionate about and I think they were paying me $51,000 a year, something like that, 51 or 54,000 a year at IJR. And so anyway, I got really, really excited about that. So I was just like, and I'm making more money, haha. And the commute was far because it was in Virginia, and I was paying taxes twice. I was paying taxes in Virginia and DC, where I lived. And so I actually ended up making about the same and paying more taxes. And also the commute was really far. So it was actually really hard to make money there also. But there were some perks, like we got to save money on food because they often would have lunches there. They would bring us food. They had tea, coffee, stuff like that. So I didn't have to like spend money a lot on eating out while I was at IJR, so the costs kind of worked in some ways, but it was still, there were problems there also, and it was also, again, problems with my supervisor. My supervisor was getting frustrated that I was either moving too fast or being too, I actually don't even know why my supervisor was frustrated at IJR. Now that I'm thinking about it, like, why was he frustrated? I don't know why he was frustrated. I was moving really fast. I was getting really excited, and I was running with stories, and I was getting like viral hits. I actually had two supervisors there, and it got to a point where like there were some issues happening there outside of me, just issues with the paper, and they were bringing like some kind of psychologist to come and ask us what our issues were, and there was some kind of drama happening there. I don't even remember what kind of drama was going on there, but the supervisors were kind of wrapped up in this drama, and I still don't even remember what the drama was, but it got to a point where I was no longer able to come up with my own stories. I was no longer able to because they were too busy to deal with approving my viral headlines, they were viral headlines. I was coming up with viral headlines, clickbait every single day, but they were starting to get busy with this sort of drama that was going on at the office, so they were no longer able to, and they also didn't trust me enough to let me just do it myself, because I was doing a great job, but they still wanted to be able to approve everything that I was doing and not let me run with it myself. So, but they didn't have time to do that anymore because of this drama, and then I had to start making doing their stupid news stories, which were very stupid. I don't remember, just very stupid clickbait, but not really viral, aggregated news stories, and it was frustrating because there were so many times when I had my own ideas every once in a while where I'd be like, guys, this is about to be a huge news story, and they'd be like, nah, we don't want to, just do the thing that we already told you to do. And then like the next day, some other news outlet would pick up this news story and it would go viral, and they'd be like, guys, why didn't anyone say anything? And I'd be like, look at my texts. Here's proof that I came up with this idea and you rejected it. And then they would get really mad at me. And it was always dudes, it was always men, and they would always, you know, I was always like the only girl at these places that I was working at, and so they always kind of treated me like I'm like a like whiny little girl, like get away from here, stop with your little stupid ideas. So I didn't feel appreciated, I didn't feel like I was growing, and I was constantly getting punished for my ideas and my creativity, and it got to a point where I started getting depressed. I started getting depressed and not feeling fulfilled at my job. Eventually, around this time, I also was, starting to explore religiously. I was starting to break out of Orthodox Judaism, Orthodox Jewish practice. I started taking trips. I took a trip to Iceland. I asked for time off from IJR. I was like, I'm getting, having mental health issues, I was getting depressed at work, started taking time off, doing things. And another thing I started doing was I started dating someone, and the person that I was dating was living in like this house with a bunch of people in Virginia. It was like a big house with like a bunch of people were living there together. So I started sleeping over at that person's house. And really that's really why I wanted to sleep over there. It wasn't for dating purposes, it wasn't for anything. I really was just trying to like sleep over at their house so that I can rent out my apartment on Airbnb, because it was getting to a point with all these costs of, traveling and going out and all these things that I wasn't able to make my rent. So the only way to pay my rent at the time was if I were to like, sleep over at someone else's place and rent out my apartment on Airbnb. When I started doing that, this was in 2017, I realized that I was making more money just a few nights out of the month from Airbnb, people, renting out my place on Airbnb, than I was making at my day job. And I realized, oh my God, what if I just slept over at this person's house full time, rented out my place on Airbnb? I would make so much money and I could quit my job. So that's what I did. I quit my job on the spot, started sleeping over at this person's house, and started renting out my place on Airbnb full time. And I made it into a whole thing. I invested into it. I brought more, I decorated it more, added amenities, just made it really, really great. And I started doing this with another place. It was being successful, and I kept making more and more money. I started doing this with another place, and then I started finding someone else to take over their lease and started doing it with a third place. And so on average, making $3,000 a month from each listing. It was these little studio apartments in DC, $3,000 a month minus per listing, minus whatever the costs were of that property. So I was making more money than I ever made in my life just doing that. And I was like, you know what? Screw DC writing jobs that don't appreciate me or appreciate my brain. I'm gonna make money on my own as an entrepreneur. And so I started doing that until, guess what? I ran into legal issues because, of course, I wasn't allowed to be leasing out people's apartments and then renting them out on Airbnb. That's illegal. That was a violation of my lease agreement, and they threatened me with a lawsuit because one of my tenants, my Airbnb guests, stupidly told my property manager about it. So then I got in trouble, and then I had to shut it all down. I had to sell all the furniture as quickly as possible. And then I went into crazy debt because it was 3 properties. So going into debt because you have to pay all those and you're not making money because you had to shut it down. And there were better things, there were ways I could have gotten out of that, but come on, give me a break. I was just out of college. I didn't know what I was doing. So I was in debt. And I was like desperate. And meanwhile, I was falling into these political groups and scams and drama and desperation. DC politics is a very toxic place for a young girl just out of college who doesn't know herself, doesn't know how to make money, and constantly is being tricked into guys. Blah. Anyway, I did this really stupid decision of taking out a cash advance loan from Bank of America, which was I believe a 40% APR. Like, so like I was getting compounded interest 40% constantly on that cash advance, which was only about like $4,000. It was crazy. And I was like, oh shit, I need to make a lot of money quick. One of my friends joked that, well, if you need a lot of cash quick, you can become a stripper. Well, first I tried to get a service job at a restaurant, because also the second best thing to being a stripper was working at a restaurant and getting paid in cash every day. So I was like, I need cash now. I need cash, quick cash. I can't wait 2 weeks for a paycheck or a month. I need quick cash right now. So I started applying for restaurant jobs. The problem with restaurant jobs is they didn't want to hire me because I had no service experience. And, as a writer and as someone who spent my later, adolescent years growing up in Beverly Hills, I didn't know anything about any type of service jobs. And so they didn't want to hire me. Even, the basic places didn't want to hire me. The basic, the cheapest restaurants didn't want to hire me. No restaurant or service industry place wanted to hire me. So the only place that wanted to hire me was actually a strip club. And I was like, great, I can make a lot of money as a cocktail waitress here. And I was like, guys, I'm still kind of religious, and I've never worn a pair of pants, because I wore skirts because I was religious. I never wore a pair of pants, let alone walking around in lingerie. So give me a break. I can't dance naked. In DC, strip clubs allow you to dance butt naked. So I was like, no, I can't dance naked. But I will go really out of my comfort zone and wear lingerie if it's going to make me money as a cocktail waitress. I started doing that, and immediately they were like, yeah, so actually we really only wanted you as a dancer because you'd never had service experience, and also we don't like that people are coming and trying to tip you money and not tipping our dancers. You're stealing money from the dancers, so the only way for you to stay here is for you to become a dancer. And I was like, I already told you from the beginning, I can't dance. I don't want to dance naked. Like, I'm not ready for that. And so basically I just left. But I used the 2 weeks and they also didn't pay me my money, by the way. It was awful. It was actually a really shitty experience. I'm kind of zooming through all this stuff because there's just so much that happened in DC that I don't even want to go into the nitty-gritty details. But that strip club they were awful to me because they thought that I was more desperate than I actually was. I wasn't as desperate as they thought I was because I have a brain and I know how to get out of that situation, even though it took me a while to realize it. So anyway, I left that place, but I used that experience to put on my resume, and I pretended that I worked there a lot longer than I did, and I pretended that I was a cocktail waitress there for a lot longer than I was, and I used that as an experience to get myself a job at another restaurant. So I actually ended up getting another restaurant job, but actually in between that and the restaurant job, I worked at the Whole Foods. Yes, I forgot about that. Whole Foods at Logan Circle. I got fired also after a couple weeks because I was just too slow bagging groceries. I was a grocery bagger and I was too slow in doing that, and that really felt shitty. Like getting fired from a strip club and getting fired from Whole Foods bagging groceries because you're too slow. Like, you really and then also I was in so much debt, and I was like, oh god, I'm not good for anything, I'm not good at anything. And it got to a point where like I was really feeling down in the dumps. Like, actually I was really feeling low. I really felt good for nothing. I would like, I had some wine bottles in my place from before because I think, I don't even remember, like I had gift wine bottles and stuff for the Airbnb, and it got to a point where I was just drinking all those wine bottles, at night, drinking myself to sleep because I was just so depressed and really down in the dumps. But then, yes, because I had applied using my experience at the strip club for a bunch of restaurants, finally a restaurant actually did get back to me because of that. And I ended up getting a job at the restaurant. I literally just and they didn't even want to hire me so much, but I would just, like a lost puppy, just hang out at that restaurant all day, every day until they finally gave in and hired me. I worked there for about 5 or 6 months. Also, that was in 2018. It was okay, working at that restaurant. I mean, it wasn't great. Actually, it was really shitty compared to any restaurant that you would work in Texas because of their minimum wage laws. A whole story that I will leave for a different time. But compared to my other experiences in DC, it was fine until they found out that I worked for Ben Shapiro. People started Googling me. They started, one person somehow realized where I worked at. I was working in conservative politics before that. These media outlets that I worked at were conservative, and this was in DC in a very lefty area, and all my coworkers were very lefty. And so one of them found out that I worked for Ben Shapiro, then told the other one, and then they told the other one, and it became a whole thing, and everybody found out that I was a crazy closeted right-winger and that they should treat me like a Nazi, which they did. And so not everybody did. There were actually some really nice people. Ironically, the only nice people that were nice to me were like the immigrants or the black people that worked there. But everybody who was white was actually trash to me. They treated me, and one of them even called me a refugee hater, which was ironic because unlike all of them, I was the only one whose my parents were literally Middle Eastern refugees. And so just all of that. And I was also dating a guy who was a lefty. He was a white liberal guy, and he was also like, treating me like I'm some kind of second-class citizen because of, I worked for Ben Shapiro, and I hated these people. They that was like a part of why I was like, you know what, I don't like my jobs, I don't like DC, I just want to get out of here. But I was kind of stuck because I was in all this debt, and I was like trying to survive, and that was my lifeline, that restaurant. But it got to a point where people started trying to get me out of there because it made them really uncomfortable that former Ben Shapiro employee and conservative person, and I was also kind of famous on Twitter, made them uncomfortable that I worked there. The general manager started being really mean to me also. And they were treating me as if like they were so nice and so benevolent for allowing me to be there because and I wish I could explain to people that don't live in DC or don't live in like these really lefty cities in America how entitled this type of person is. They just treat you like you're actually a Nazi. Like they literally treat you like you're some kind like a Hitler Nazi, and as if they're so nice and loving and accepting for allowing you to be in their presence, even though they were all fat and gross and disgusting and really just awful. And they lied a lot. And they were also very racist. Ironically, they were also very racist. Like, for example, that restaurant, I was the only person who would take the black customers because I was a new person and the weirdo. And so nobody wanted to take the black customers. So they would literally, and they would say it out loud, they'd be like, I'm not taking the black. And they also wouldn't take the trans. There were some people that were walking there and they were trans. They were like men who cross-dressed as women. They didn't want to take those people either because I guess they didn't tip well or whatever. I always got tipped great. The black people tipped me great. You know what I mean? The trans people, there weren't so many of them, there were like 2. They tipped me great. I was fine. And I was fine to take every customer that wanted to sit at my table, sit in my section. You know what I mean? Because I was business minded, because I was a capitalist. But these anyway. So like they were just gross in every level, and they were hypocrites, and they were just awful people. And good riddance to them. They're probably still working at that restaurant because they're losers. But anyway, while I was there, I randomly, I also started going to school. I went back to school, which was a mistake, blowing a lot of money on school, but I also used some of the money that I got from school to pay for like my real estate endeavors, which is a whole different story, and that I guess I'll say in a different time. I was getting, I realized it was easier to get college loans than it was to get actual real estate loans. So I first started off by getting college loans and putting them towards real estate. I blew it all, of course, so whatever. We make mistakes. But anyway, while I was at the restaurant, I got an email from Fox News. They wanted to hire me, and I was like, oh my god, I could work at Fox News. first I thought it was a joke, but then I realized, oh my god, it's real, working at Fox News. I'm not going to elaborate on how it was when I took the job at Fox News and how that experience was. I will instead include the link of that Fox News experience maybe in the description. You guys can like watch that video. But yeah, I worked at Fox News, worked there for a while, and had another set of issues working there. How much did they pay me? I think they paid me also like $51,000 to $54,000 a year, something like that. I lied to my mom and told her that I was getting paid more, and she still thought I was getting paid nothing. So that's when I was like, you know what? All these stupid political jobs are stupid. All these stupid political people are stupid. Everybody's poor. I remember going to, I won't say his name, but one of Trump's advisors. I went to his house one time to pick up something. And like, this was like a famous Trump advisor that all of the lefties, the poor lefties, were like complaining on social media about how he's so rich and he's so big and scary and rich and big, mean, whatever. And I went to a few Trump advisors' homes actually, but this was one of them where he was just like, oh my god, his house was so shitty. And it was so sad for me. It was so sad for me that if I worked so hard, become a big, huge political advisor in DC that all the poor people hate and slam for being rich, and they come to my house and try to kill me and this and that. Like, no matter how hard I work, I'm still gonna be poor and have a shitty house like that. That's when I realized, screw DC, I don't wanna work here. And all of them had lives like that. Everybody was poor. Everybody had shitty homes. Even the richest people had shitty homes. They had shitty lifestyles. It sucked. And those are the people that all the poor lefties envied, you know? That's when I realized, like, screw all this with a 10-foot pole and thorns. Like, I don't want to be in this life. But anyway, this was 2018 after leaving Fox News. First, I had to get my revenge on Fox News because I hated them. So I went and worked for a lefty media outlet called Mediaite. I mean, they weren't so lefty, but they used to write news articles slamming Fox News, so that's what I wanted to do. So I first worked for them. I made like 35, 38K a year, but it was remote, so it was worth it, and I was slamming Fox News articles. Scratched that itch for a while, eventually left Mediaite to work at the Pinkston Group, the PR news outlet. They paid me like $72,000. That was like double what I was making at the previous job, and more money than I'd ever seen in my life from a job. Of course, you know, growing up in Beverly Hills, all of these things were a joke, but for that time, it was like a godsend to work at the Pinkston Group. But I still wanted to leave DC, and I wanted to work remotely for the Pinkston Group, which for them, they wanted people that were dedicated to working on site long term, and that wasn't me, so I had to leave the Pinkston Group. But I will say the Pinkston Group was the best place I ever worked at in DC, and I will continue sending them business, and someday I would love to hire the Pinkston Group as my PR people because they actually are really good at their jobs. Really, really good company. Sean McCabe is one of the founders, and he's brother of my really good friend Neil. And anyway, so there were a lot of good people too in DC, but and there's so much that I'm not telling you, but that was Pinkston Group. That was 2019. Also in 2019, I got involved in fitness, workout, pole dancing, started doing things to improve my body, started thinking about my finances, thinking about loans, thinking about real estate, but I still didn't make any move yet because I didn't, you know, I was still learning. Then towards the end of 2019, that's when I decided to, and then I was having some issues. I was having a stalker. I decided to leave the country for a while, put all my stuff in storage, people's homes, stuff like that, left the country, came back in 2020 and started working. I don't know if I told people this, but I started doing work for the Trump campaign. I won't elaborate on that. So 2020, Trump was running for president, and it was kind of a short-term thing. You know, I was actually ready to leave DC, and I actually wanted to try to figure out how to get into real estate, maybe get a job in real estate. But then I got offered this job, this Trump job. You know, I won't say exactly how the job was structured, how it was, you know, just the details of who exactly my boss was. It was in the Trump camp, right? But there's so many different parts of the Trump campaign, the Trump admin, the Trump, you know, corporation. Like, there were just so many different parts to it. So I don't want to really elaborate on that for like a bunch of reasons, not because I'm trying to be like guarded and, you know, my life is an open slate, but I just don't want to throw other people under the bus if I don't have to, if it's not in my interest to. So whatever. I had a feeling that Trump was going to lose, but for the time being, I knew that I needed a job in order to qualify for a bank loan in order to get into real estate. So it actually, whether or not Trump was going to win, it didn't make a difference to me, even though in order for me to get that job, they promised me a job in the admin, in the Trump admin, and, you know, they promised me like this kind of really cool job. But I also had a feeling that he wasn't going to win. So either way, the reason why I stayed in DC and got that job was because I knew it would help me to get a bank loan so that I can make my jump into real estate. And buy my first property, because I had some goals, I had some deadlines. By this age, I wanted to have my first property, and I wanted to own my first property, and I didn't know how else to do that. So anyway, I did that, and I was able to qualify for a bank loan, but the amount of money that I qualified for a bank loan was not enough for me to buy a property in DC, but it was enough for me to buy a property in Texas. But the problem was I was working in DC, not in Texas. So how would I even go to Texas to even see the property? While I was mulling on that issue, all of a sudden COVID broke and everybody was forced to work remotely. So I was like, okay, I'm working remotely. And so the place that I was living in, I was like, okay, you know what, guys, I have to quickly go to LA for something. I went to LA, then I had, my friend go to my place in DC, pack all my stuff, put it in my car, drive the car out to Virginia, leave it in a parking lot, and then ship me the keys. And then I told the person I was renting from, here's an extra month of rent, I'm not coming back. And then while I was in LA, I lived with my parents and prepared to buy my first property, because I knew that this was my only chance to get out of DC. My only chance. And gosh, I didn't even tell you all the crazy shit that happened in DC. There was so much more crazy shit. Oh my God, there was a lot of crazy shit. There was a lot of people that I got involved in. There were organizations that I got involved in. There was a lot of weird traveling that was happening. You know, it was just an era of desperation. I just told you my jobs. And I didn't even tell you all of it. But anyway, this video is getting long. So from LA, got a flight to DFW, Texas, my first time ever there, and visited a couple properties, decided on a property within a matter of days, decided to make an offer. I had to go back to LA. Actually, I had to go to Virginia because my boss decided that he wanted us to go back to Virginia to work. So I had to go back to Virginia, but while I was in Virginia, even though they made me sit at my desk and do the writing at the desk under their nose, even though, you know, they didn't need me to do that because I would work really fast, but they had this fear that I was going to leave my job, which they were correct, because eventually, you know, I bought a house through the notary in Virginia. And, you know, I would be like, hey, you know what? I got to go outside and make a phone call. So while I was going outside making the phone call, I was buying a house. Bought the house. It made my boss really annoyed to hear that while all this stuff was going on, I went and bought a house in Texas, because in his mind, I was going to move to Texas. But no, I was still working there, and I worked there until I was like, okay guys, I want to go and start working on my house in Texas, because I'm going to lose money if I'm paying, you know, mortgage every month, and I can't be there to like fix up the house so that I can turn it into an asset. So they were like, well, even though this is a writing job and we absolutely don't even need you to be here sitting under our noses all day, we can't have you work remotely, because they were boomers. So anyway, I left. I was like, okay, great, fire me, but I have the house at least. So I went there, and then I got started in my real estate investment project. And that's really where my official working in politics ended. There were a bunch of more things that happened since then. Even when I moved to Texas, there were a bunch of things that happened because of my previous involvement in politics. There was the January 6th investigations happening. There were all these different things happening that I was still experiencing some of the aftershock effects of being involved in politics. But I was, there were, and there, God, there is so much that I haven't told you about stuff that happened in DC. You know, being involved in politics, it's not just the fun stuff, it's also the negative stuff. Your friends are constantly being investigated by the government. They're being investigated for lawsuits by their oppositions, by people that don't like them, by people that they wrote a bad article about, or by people that just hate them because of their ideology. And so, and that's happening to you as well. I was constantly having to move around the places I was living in DC, and that's part of why I wanted to get into real estate, was because it just made me feel powerful. The thought of having something, that an asset that belonged to me, that nobody can take away from me, that I can just live there and nobody can kick me out. You know what I mean? So I did that, and that really became my safety. Moving to Texas and starting to own real estate really became my safe ground, and I really started to detach myself from my political connections. But you know, all my friends at the time were still in politics, so there was still some stuff that was happening, and it took a while. And you know, fast forward to, it took a while, but fast forward to 2022, you know, I've been owning property for about 2 years now, and you know, I'm about to make a move on a third property, even though I'm even more leveraged and over leveraged than I was before. But I'm getting more and more accustomed to the real estate game, that I'm starting to feel safe in it, and thinking about investing on behalf of other people as well, because I'm just enjoying it so much. I'm learning so much, and I'm seeing a future in this, seeing a future in making money and working out and doing things that are healthy, productive, and you know, I learned a lot in DC politics, but I also learned that I never want to be involved in politics again. It was a good lesson. It was a good lesson. I never want to be involved in politics again. I also really don't want to be involved with people that are very involved in politics, because I know how it was for me. I know how it affected me in my life, and I know that it made me a target, and I didn't want to be that. I just wanted to be somebody that was just coasting through life. I didn't want to be stuck to people's like ideological notions. I wanted to just make money, build, grow, feel powerful, help other people make money and feel powerful. You know, the difference between business and politics is, politics, the more people you get involved, the more people you're causing to become weak, to become forcing them to take a side. They become targets. The more people you're involving in toxicity. In business, the more people you get involved, the more people you're causing to become stronger. You're causing them to make money, you're causing them to grow, learn things, learn skills, productivity. You know what I mean? Like, there's a win-win for everybody when it's politics, when it's a consensual thing. In business, sorry, there's a win-win for everybody in business when it's a consensual trade of ideas, productivity, money, growth. In politics, it's a lose-lose for everybody, because it's a fight. Politics tends to be a fight. It's government, it's force, it's all the things that on a core level I despise, because my family had to run away from it. My family had escaped their country because of war and politics and these drama, bad, toxic things, and then I went right back into it, you know what I mean? So I really hope that going forward I can make up for my time that I spent in politics by being a good source of light to those people, maybe the people that I've met in the past, but also people in my future, that I can be a source of light, growth, making money for myself, for other people, for my family, and, you know, more and more, you know, maybe also for the people that I actually even knew in DC, even for the people that I didn't like at the time, that I despised and resented. I want to get to a level that I feel so strong and so stable and so safe in who I am that I will willingly want to go and help those people also become strong and make a lot of money. Because, like, at the end of the day, hurt people. Strong people help other people become stronger. And my goal in life is not to hurt anybody. My goal in life is to become strong, so strong that I feel empowered to strengthen even the people that I didn't like in the past because they were weak. Anyway, hope that was an inspiring video. And I'm still in Colombia and still in this little town called Villa de Leyva, and it's really cute. And, you know, maybe someday I want to invest in this place because it's a great place and it's growing pretty fast. And I'm constantly seeing Westerners wanting to move here too, which is interesting. So anyway, see you guys later, and hope to hear your feedback in the comments.